So thank you very much, everybody, for taking time out of your busy days to come and hear this talk. As far as questions go, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to stop for polls 6 times throughout this talk. We'll first ask you a question, but also to open the floor to answer any questions that you may have. I also need to apologize. I'm still in the process of getting over COVID. And so every so often I might still cough. So it sounds worse than it is sometimes. But anyways, I just thought I'd give you a warning on that, like right now. So anyway, so my topic today is Disciplined Agile Delivery. I'm going to argue that it's Scrum done right. This is a talk that I've been giving for many years now in some form or the other. So I'm happy to share this with you today. So as you probably know, I'm the co-creator along with Mark Lyons of the Disciplined Agile Toolkit. Al Shalloway also had significant input into it, as have others. I'm currently the Vice President and Chief Scientist for Disciplined Agile at PMI. I'm also the, I guess, the thought leader behind the Agile modeling and Agile data methods from the early 2000s, where we took on some fairly interesting topics at the time. So anyways, just thought I would share that. I can also be found easily on social media if you want to follow me. And I'm always happy to have people reach out. So today, we've got a fairly jam-packed topic. This is a very large topic. And so I'm going to do I hope a fairly decent overview of it. So I'm going to talk a bit about Disciplined Agile, give you a brief overview of what it is and why it should be of interest to you. Then I'm going to talk about Disciplined Agile Delivery and start diving into some of the details. And I'll talk about how we can address some of the missing details in Scrum. So Scrum is a very small body of knowledge. And it's focused, and it purposely leaves out technical details, for example. Well, those technical details you actually need to fill in. And other people have done the work for you. So anyway, so we're going to take a look at that. And for those of you who have been doing Scrum for a while, you've probably already addressed a lot of these challenges. For those of you reasonably new to Scrum, you will probably, I'll hopefully make life easier for you. Then I'm going to talk about how to extend Scrum for different scenarios. And then finally, I'm going to give you some critical skills along process improvement. So I'm going to show you how to move beyond the fail fast, nonsense, basically, that many Agile coaches have bought into right now. We don't need to fail as often as we do. I can teach you to be smarter about that. But I hope I will teach you to be smarter about that, I should say. But anyways, and particularly the last part of this talk will be a set of skills that you'll be able to use throughout your entire career. It's one of those fundamental things that I believe everybody needs. So anyways, we'll see what happens. So why should you be interested in Disciplined Agile? That's a good question. Well, because frankly, why not just adopt a method or framework like Scrum or SAFe or LESS or something else? Like, why not, right? Well, let's actually, excuse me, let's actually look at what happens in practice. Not the marketing rhetoric, not all the fanciful claims, what actually occurs in practice. And let's assume that you adopt the framework successfully. So when you first start doing something new, your effectiveness goes down. You're in learning mode, right? This Scrum or SAFe or whatever is new to you. So your effectiveness goes down, but very quickly you learn how to work in a more effective manner. Things get better, but you hit the limits of the framework. So Scrum solves a certain problem, SAFe solves a certain problem, LESS solves a certain problem, and so on. So once you've solved that problem, that framework, that method doesn't have much more to offer you. And now, yes, there's all this marketing rhetoric, everything is the art of the possible. And yes, you can tailor the framework to meet your needs, but they don't really give you much advice for doing so. That's not their business model. They leave it up to you, or the advice basically boils down to hire our expensive consultants. Well, and that's okay. It's reasonable advice, I guess, but maybe we can do better. So the issue, though, is the question you should be asking is, how much better did things get? Well, if you believe their marketing rhetoric, some people will tell you, oh, adopt, this framework and you'll be 10 times more productive, or and here's a case study describing it. Sure enough, I've been involved with teams that have dramatically improved their effectiveness. And it's not because they adopted a new framework. It's because they were so messed up that doing anything would help them. I've literally been, I've told this story about 1,000,000 times now, but I've literally been involved with a team where we, excuse me, changed the coffee. We improved the quality of the coffee in the breakout room, and we raised the productivity by something like 20 to 30% of the team. And we measured this. I can't remember what the exact number was now, but we measured this. And so it's just something as simple as improving the coffee had a huge productivity impact for this team. So anyways, be that as it may. So who do we trust? Because all these stories about doing twice the work in half the time and all this sort of stuff. It's wonderful marketing rhetoric, but is it true? Well, I would advise you to not listen to the purveyors of the framework. So the people behind framework X is going to tell you that framework X is really awesome. Okay, fine. Good for them. That's marketing. I would rather listen to, a reputable source. So the best source that I could find is Dr. Don Reifer. He earned his PhD studying exploring the issue of how effective is Agile in practice. And what I find, and he's continued this work as well. And so a couple of critical things about his work. First, it's statistically significant, as you can see. This data is a bit old now, but he's looking at lots of teams. So it's not just a small, it's not just a few anecdotes. It's a statistically significant sample from a wide range of countries and organizations and so on. What's also important is he's not a framework guy. So he's not a Scrum guy, he's not a less guy, he's not a safe guy, he's not a Disciplined Agile guy. He's a researcher. He earned his PhD in this from a reputable university. So when you look at the reputable data, and this actually is very close to some data that I had when I worked for IBM years ago. Now that data, that was like 10 some odd years ago now. But anyways, we had similar data to this. And what we found, what Reifer found in this case, was that the productivity goes up 7 to 12% on average. Now that's pretty good, and that's an average, right? Some people are doing better, some people are doing worse, but on average, 7 to 12%. So not quite the 10 times productivity we've been promised, or the twice the work and half the time, which is basically 4 times productivity, but 7 to 12%. So that's still pretty good, but maybe we can do better. I think that's a valid question. So this talk is about how can we do better. So what's Disciplined Agile? So Disciplined Agile is a toolkit, not a framework. So where the frameworks tell you what to do, they prescribe what to do, regardless of their marketing rhetoric. DA tells you what to think about and gives you choices. I'm gonna walk you through what that means in a bit. I'm gonna show you how Scrum prescribes things. So what we want to do in DA is to help you learn to get better at getting better. We teach the skill of process improvement, not the skill of framework adoption, because those are two very different things, as you'll see. So Disciplined Agile is a hybrid. We adopt strategies from a wide range of sources, including Scrum, but we don't limit ourselves to Scrum. That would be foolish, because we choose to observe. So when I walk into organizations, I can see that some teams are doing Scrum, some are doing Kanban, some are doing Safe, some are still doing traditional, for example, and that's okay. Do the best that you can in the situation that you face. So what we do is we use these frameworks and methods and other sources, of course, as sources of great ideas and practices and strategies. And then we put those practices and strategies into context to help you choose the right strategies that make sense for you in the situation that you face. We have also rethought the mindset. So many people will point to the Agile Manifesto, or more accurately, the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, as the source of, here's the mindset of Agile. And it's really good, don't get me wrong, but it's, 21 years old now. It is focused on, at the time, it was focused on software development, but yet really we're trying to apply Agile and lean ways of thinking across a wide range of situations, not just Agile or not just software development. And frankly, we've learned a few things in the last 20 some odd years. So a couple of years ago, a bunch of us stepped back and we asked ourselves, how would we write the manifesto today, based on what we've learned, based on what we know, and based on the idea that it's not just software development. And this is what we came up with. So we describe the mindset, the Disciplined Agile mindset, as a collection of principles. So we believe in these principles. And as a result, we make promises to ourselves. Here's how we're gonna behave, both within our team and in the way that we collaborate with others. And in order to fulfill these promises, we follow these guidelines. Now, I'm going to hit on a few of these ideas throughout this talk today. This is well described at pmi.org, and I'll share some URLs with you in a bit. So this is all public. All these, I should have mentioned, these slides are already up on slideshare.net. They are also, we use a lot of material that's on pmi.org available free of charge, and I'll maybe sharing some URLs as we go. So the idea here is that there are a couple of interesting observations. First, there's a lot of lean concepts here. Second, and there's of course a lot of Agile stuff here as well, but we've gone far beyond software development, and this is absolutely critical. And I'm sure many of you are struggling right now applying Agile outside the software development area. So, but anyways, we'll talk about that in a bit. So DA's fundamental advice is to start where you are. So we're not here to compete against Scrum or SAFe for others. We're here to help you to enhance Scrum. So if you're currently doing Scrum, great, we can show you how to get better at it. You're currently doing SAFe, great, we can show you how to do better at it. We can teach you how to actually improve effectively. That's what I'm going to end this presentation with. If you're doing traditional still, great, we can show you how to improve upon that. So whatever you're currently doing today, well, that's what you're doing. So you're starting where you are. Do the best that you can in the situation that you face. And you're professionals, I know you're already doing this, but also strive to get better, strive to improve, strive to learn, to experiment and learn and get better. Always be constantly improving. And that's where the frameworks tend to fail. They talk a good game, but as we're seeing on average, you hit this glass ceiling, you hit this, you get the benefit, you get the benefit of these frameworks, these methods. But once you've adopted the method, they don't have anything else to give you other than promises. DA tries to go beyond that. So let's do a poll. So Jan, if you could bring up the poll. So the question I'd like I'll give you a couple minutes to answer, or a minute or so to answer, is: are you applying Agile outside of your non-software teams? So we're going to do a Zoom poll here, I hope. And there we go. Given that this is a fairly straightforward question, I'm going to give you about another 20 seconds to answer, and then we'll end the poll and we'll look at the results. Okay, about 5 more seconds. Okay, so we'll end the poll here. Okay, so about a 60-40 split. A little over half of you are trying to apply Agile outside of non-software teams. Fantastic. Otherwise, the next section of my talk isn't going to go so well. But anyways, let's jump in on it. Okay, so the point I want to make is that Agile can and should be applied throughout the entire organization. So we've architected the Disciplined Agile toolkit into 4 layers. The first one is what we call the foundation layer. This is where all the fundamental concepts are. So the mindset, and people, the way the roles and how you organize teams, but also fundamental concepts from agile, lean, and even serial strategies, like fundamental ideas that can be applied anywhere in the organization. And then how to choose your way of working, how to have a fit for purpose way of working. And like I said, I'm going to be focusing on that towards the end of the presentation. Building upon that is the Disciplined DevOps layer. I'm going to talk a lot about this coming up soon. We'll stop sharing that. Sorry. Okay, trying to end that. Okay. Anyways, what happened here? Okay, so Disciplined DevOps. So this is enterprise class DevOps. Like I said, we're going to dive down into details on this. To me, DevOps or Disciplined DevOps, or certainly DevOps, is now table stakes in modern organizations. Like 10 years ago, yeah, DevOps was pretty advanced and pretty new, and radical concepts for a lot of organizations. Today, if you're not doing DevOps and if you're not actively doing it and trying to get better at it, you're in serious trouble. So, because the vast majority of organizations are actually software organizations at their core, and Disciplined DevOps is all about how do we be effective at exactly that. Building upon DevOps are value streams. So how do we bring products and services to our customers? So a value stream begins, ends, and hopefully continues with the customer in mind. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more too, particularly when we get into process improvement. And then finally, the rest of the organization. And so how do we go, go about finance and people management, what we call HR, vendor management, and so on. So a couple of interesting points I want to make here. First, these hexes are what we call process blades or process areas. And the basic idea here is that all aspects of your organization can improve. They can all get better, but they're also different. So earlier, if you remember, a few slides ago, I shared the mindset for the Disciplined Agile mindset for business agility. And we saw that it was made up of three things: principles, promises, and guidelines. We also extend the mindset for each of these process areas with philosophies that are unique to that area. Well, why do we do that? Well, because the software people come to the table with a different background, with a different view, with a different mindset, with a different set of philosophies than, say, the finance people, who come to the table with a different set of philosophies than the portfolio management people, than the information technology people, than the strategy people, than the marketing people, and so on. And it's this diversity in your organization that enables you to be innovative, to be effective. So in order to support true business agility, we also need to respect this fact that even though we might have this shared mindset across the organization, that different groups of people will come to the table with a different view, and that's good. But in order for me to work effectively with the finance people, I better understand these philosophies that they're hopefully coming to the table with. I better understand their unique point of view, because it's different than my unique point of view. And yet they should hopefully do the same. They should hopefully respect me enough to learn about my mindset. So this is critical for effective coaching and for effective collaboration, let alone effective coaching. So you can think of Disciplined Agile as an umbrella. There's right now in the toolkit, we put, I think it's about 1,600 practices and strategies into context. And we'll see some examples of how we do that in a bit. And the idea is that when you're putting together your process, your way of working, you'll pull these techniques off the shelf and combine them into your unique wow. Why is this important? Well, because we're all unique people. I'm a unique person, you're a unique person. So because we make teams of people, our teams are all unique. We face unique situations, we work for unique organizations, and our situation changes constantly. So the implication is that if we want to be effective, we need to be good at choosing our own way of working and to evolve and learn and to improve upon our way of working as we go. And this is a fundamental Agile concept. I've been involved with Agile from the very beginning. And the philosophy of that a team should own its own process. That's exactly what this is. You should own your process. You should choose your way of working. and be allowed to determine how you are going to do the work that you have chosen to do. You're going to be self-organizing. So this is a fundamental concept. So it's just like when you go home tonight for dinner and you make, you make dinner for your family, you'll go to the pantry and you'll pick ingredients off the shelf, and then you'll cook them up and you'll have dinner. And tomorrow night you'll go to the pantry, the same pantry, but pick different ingredients off the shelf and make up a different dinner, and so on and so on and so on. Well, it's the same sort of thing, because tonight you're in the mood for certain food. Tomorrow night you'll be in the mood for something else. Well, it's the same with your process. My team will choose our own way of working. The data warehousing team, in another part of the organization, will work in a very different way because they're a data warehousing team. Our app team will work in their own way. Our marketing team will work in their own way, and so on, and hopefully learn and improve over time. So one size does not fit all. Now, another interesting implication of this is you need to choose a fundamental way of working, a life cycle, or arguably a method to start out with. As a result, in DA, we support multiple life cycles. And I'll go down into the details in some of them in a minute. So we support an agile project-based life cycle. We also support a continuous delivery agile life cycle, more of a DevOpsy type of a thing. These are both based on Scrum. We support a lean project lifecycle and a lean continuous delivery lifecycle, which to me is more of a true DevOps type of an approach. So whereas an agile project team might build something and deliver it in 3 to 6 months, a continuous delivery agile team might be constantly working on something and release into production once a week. Whereas a continuous delivery lean team might be delivering into production several times a day. Different teams work in different ways. So the two continuous delivery life cycles, the two lean life cycles are based on Kanban. The top two life cycles are project life cycles. The bottom two life cycles are product or service team life cycles, like long-standing team life cycles. We support an exploratory life cycle based on lean startup. So, creating MVPs to explore new product or service ideas, experiment with them first, figure out what the customers actually want before you build them following another one of the life cycles. A program life cycle for large initiatives like teams of teams. This is what Less and Nexus and other methodologies tend to focus on. How do you do large programs? And then we're also expanding to include a serial life cycle, like the waterfall life cycle, because we can choose to observe that serial work is still happening in most organizations will still have serial projects underway, and that's okay. And a citizen development life cycle. So how do the business people build their own apps, using low code, no code development tools? So, like a do-it-yourself type of a life cycle. So different teams in different situations will work in different ways. And what we want to do is allow our teams to choose a way of working that makes sense for them. So here's a potentially uncomfortable question. So have you ever been involved with a failed Scrum team? So I'll give you about a minute. There's a bunch of options for this one. So if everybody could answer, I'd appreciate it, because it'd be statistically good to get as many answers as possible. The more, the merrier. And also, if you have any questions, I'm going to do one more slide after this, and I'll also talk about these results. But if you have any questions for any of the material that I've talked about so far, please put them in the chat, because I'm happy to stop and take a few questions. So I'm going to give this another 20 seconds. Okay, 10 more seconds. So if you haven't answered, I'd really appreciate it if you could answer this question. Even if the answer is you're not doing Scrum or if you've never been on a failed one, great. Whatever the answer is, whatever the answer is. Okay, so let's stop that one. I wrote down a summary of it. I'm going to stop sharing this one. Okay. So why did I ask? Hang on. Let me just cancel this. Okay. So why did I ask this question? So it was interesting. So one of you indicated that of the 22 people that answered, one indicated that you'd cancel as the result of a sprint review. Great. Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be. 6 of you went to the end. One said it was canceled for some other reason. Maybe somebody just pulled the plug. 9 of you said no, you'd never been on a failed Scrum project, and 5 of you said you weren't doing Scrum at all. Fair enough. Okay, so why is this important? Well, the point I want to make is this one. So, excuse me, COVID cough, gotta love it. Anyways, the point I want to make is that whenever I talk to senior management in organizations about this idea that different teams will work in different ways, they usually get pretty nervous. Some don't. The more sophisticated organizations don't, but sometimes, almost always, senior management gets concerned. And the issue is, how are we going to govern? How are we going to lead? How are we going to monitor these teams if they're all working differently? Don't we need to inflict the same governance strategy on them? And one of the significant challenges in many organizations is they apply the same governance strategy across all their teams. So they'll almost always have a traditional approach to governance based on heavyweight milestones and quality gates and filling in the same documents and getting them reviewed and stuff like that. And that might have worked for your serial teams, but it doesn't work. Excuse me. It does not work very well for your agile teams, and is actually quite harmful. So what we do in DA is we've built governance right in. One aspect of governance is to have lightweight risk-based milestones. And it's actually similar to Scrum. So in Scrum, now they're not very clear about this. They don't explicitly call it out as governance, to my knowledge. But there's 2 implied, what we would consider milestones. The first one is at the end of there's basically one. At the end of each sprint, you're supposed to ask the question, how are we going to go forward? So is things fine? We just keep on as we're going? Do we need to pivot? Is this effort no longer viable and we should cancel? Or have we built enough? Do we have sufficient functionality to justify releasing into production or to releasing into the marketplace? So that's what happens in a sprint review. That's one of the things that happens in a sprint review. And that's basically 2 of these milestones. Should we continue? Should we continue on, or should we release? Now, there's others, as you can see, that are effectively missing in Scrum, and we'll talk about this, but it's because of Scrum focusing on construction and not on the beginning and end phases. So, points I want to make here is that different teams in different situations will fulfill these milestones in different ways. So, a team that's building a website will take a very loose approach to addressing these milestones. A team that is building a medical device will have a very sophisticated approach because it's a life-critical situation, right? So each team should address these milestones appropriately, both address the milestones that are in scope for you and address them appropriately. So as long as you're addressing these risks and showing and doing so in an appropriate manner, then that's sufficient. Now, this requires your governance people, the executives, to have the skills and the flexibility to allow this. But the point I want to make is that this is built right in, and arguably, it's at least some aspects of this have been built into Scrum from the very, very beginning. So, what is Disciplined Agile Delivery all about? This is one. If you remember back to that big diagram I showed you, with all of the enterprise agility one with all the hexes on it. Disciplined Agile Delivery is one of 24 hexes. It's the one so this process blade is focused on software-based solution delivery. So DA, or Disciplined Agile Delivery, is people first. It's a people-oriented, get people working together effectively, learning-oriented, sort of constantly trying to improve, constantly trying to get better, hybrid agile approach to IT solution delivery. It's goal-driven. I'm going to jump into that in a bit, and it's enterprise-aware. So we go beyond the team. One of the challenges one of the great things, I should say, about Agile is that it's team-focused. So it really helped the industry up its game. One of the challenges with Agile is that it's team-focused, and we really need to be enterprise-focused. We want to, not only doing what's good for the team, but what's also good for our organization, and ideally for the overall ecosystem as well. So we need to look beyond the boundaries of the team. So Disciplined Agile Delivery is one of the 6 process blades of the Disciplined Agile DevOps layer, or the Disciplined DevOps layer, I should say. So there's a few issues with Scrum. There's things that are purposely missing, and to be fair, they're clear about this. This is one of the things I love about Scrum. They're very clear. This is the scope of Scrum. This is what we focus on, and then the rest we leave up to you. So that's perfectly fair. One of the things they do is they purposely don't address technical details, which is fine, right? This enables you to apply Scrum concepts to more than just software development. So one of the challenges with Scrum is that because it's so narrowly focused and small, that's a great thing, but it also it doesn't address all the roles within your organization, for example, right? It leaves a lot of stuff up to you. So it explicitly addresses 3 roles. I would argue that customer is a 4th role that we should consider to be a real role, and some people do, some people don't. I certainly do. That's okay. So these are the Scrum roles, all good stuff. But in DA, we decide like I said, we don't limit ourselves to Scrum. And this is a very important consideration because, well, first thing is that we can choose to observe that not all teams are Scrum teams. Remember, I walked through, overviewed at least, I guess it was 8 different life cycles. Only 2 of those 8 were based on Scrum. The rest were not Scrum. So, sometimes you have Agile project teams. So that would get led by a project manager, an Agile project manager. Sometimes you have a marketing team, for example. Well, that would be led by a marketing manager, I would think, or a marketing leader, not a Scrum master, and so on. So different teams need different types of leads. So we take a more generic approach in DA and call it team lead and not Scrum master, because words count. We also adopt both product owner and team member from Scrum. Those are pretty good ideas. So as you know, the product owner guides the team in building the right solution. And this is important. This will be important in a minute. And we call customers stakeholders because stakeholders is a more inclusive concept. So it's not, and even though I love the term customer, don't get me wrong, the challenge is that too many people interpret customer to mean business person or a domain person. Yet on our teams, we have technical stakeholders as well. We have the support people, the operations people, the maintenance team, or our team if we end up having to maintain and evolve our solution as we go. So there's the auditors, IT executives, and so on. So there's many non-business stakeholders that our PO needs to understand and represent and so on. So we choose to call this out explicitly. So one of our philosophies is to make things explicit, to take the mystery out of the way things work, to be less opaque than other methods. We also explicitly call out the role of architecture owner. So where Scrum chooses to ignore technical details on purpose, and that's okay, that's their decision. In DA, we don't do that. We explicitly address technical concerns, including architecture. So the architecture owner is a similar concept to the product owner in that they guide the team in building the solution right. So the product owner focuses on the right solution. The architecture owner focuses on building the solution right to make sure that we're not injecting new technical debt, hopefully, and paying down existing technical debt, that our system or our solution will stand the test of time. So they're looking forward, and they're taking technical considerations into account, longer term issues into account. So the architecture owner and the product owner and the team lead, the Scrum Master, based on a Scrum team, work together to lead and guide the team. And then, of course, specialized roles, because there's far more to it than that. Sometimes you need UI experts on your team, for example, or testing experts, or security experts, or marketing staff, or procurement people, and so on. So there's many, many roles in your organization that we should respect and explicitly include as appropriate. So as we start to scale Agile, both across the organization and into more complex situations, these specialized roles come into the situation. Fair enough. So in DAD, we want to help you to adopt and then evolve your fit for purpose way of working. And this is based on two principles. First, that context counts, that you are unique people in a unique situation that's evolving over time. And you have unique priorities, you have unique backgrounds. You know, even though you let's pretend everybody on this call was a programmer, you would all work in different ways because you're different people with different backgrounds, and that's okay. And the second principle, choice is good. I want to be able to choose the right strategy for me in my situation. I want to do the best that I can, not just do what I'm told to do. Okay, so the prescriptive processes, the methods and frameworks, they tell you what to do. They present things as a best practice and they spin a good marketing story. But we all inherently know that we need to choose our own way of working if we want to be successful, that we want to have a fit for purpose way of working. So how do we do this? So earlier I said how in DA, we tell you what to think about, not what to do, and we give you options for doing it. Well, here's how we go about communicating that. This is an example of a goal diagram. You're going to see a lot of goal. You can see about another 10 or 15 goal diagrams throughout this talk. This is just one. So this is for doing initial release planning, basically. So the goal, the process goal in this case, is plan the release. How do we go about planning? All these planning activities. These square rectangles are called decision points. These are the things that we need to think about. So who's doing the, excuse me, who's doing the planning? What is the scope of the plan? How much detail do we need to go into? How are we going to go about estimation? How are we going to capture the plan, if at all? And so on. So these are decisions that we need to make. Now, sometimes they're made for us. You might have corporate standards that you follow. You might have a prescriptive framework like Scrum or SAFe or something else inflicted on you, and those decisions have already been made. My advice would be to, think for yourselves and choose the best way of working, but, do what you got to do, right? These are options, practices, strategies. The bolded ones are suggested options. So if you're in a fairly straightforward situation, small team, working together closely, taking on a straightforward problem, then more than likely the suggested options are great starting points for you. Now you're still gonna have to do a little bit of thinking. They're gonna be about 95% correct because teams aren't always the same people in the same situation, but they're a good start. So if you don't want to, if you want to just get going and not do a lot of thinking, then that's the way to go. So we do, in some ways we can, it's not prescriptive, but we can almost support prescriptive, just do what you're told type of an approach. When you see an arrow beside the list, that's what's called an ordered list. And what that indicates is that the strategies towards the top of the list are generally more effective than the strategies towards the bottom. Now your mileage may vary, but for the most part, that seems to be the case. When there's no arrow, that's an unordered list. So although we can tell you the advantages and disadvantages of each of these techniques and when to use them and when not, might not want to use them, we can't say technique A is generally better than technique B for all situations. Right? So it just doesn't work that way. So when you see an arrow, that's effectively a maturity model for So for those of you who are process people, this is an example of a continuous improvement approach, or the continuous model from CMMI. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, count yourself lucky. But anyways, all good stuff. Okay, so the idea here is that if you're reasonably experienced at planning, then this is probably enough of a checklist to remind you that, oh yeah, there's some options here. Oh yeah, I remember doing planning poker. I know how to do that. Yeah, planning poker is probably the way to go in this situation, right? So, but say you're not, right? Say you don't have a lot of planning experience in your team. Well, how do you go down to the next level of detail? Because there's a lot of stuff here, right? And frankly, I don't expect anybody to be an expert at all this sort of stuff. Now, you might, for whatever reason, love to do planning, and you might be really good at all these sorts of things. But then, okay, fine, good for you. But then I'll show you another process goal diagram for testing, say, and you're just not a tester and you don't have a background in that, so you'll know almost nothing about it, and that's okay, right? Different people have different strengths. So let's say we want to dive down. We need to dive down the next level of detail. This is a screenshot from the DA browser. This product is freely available to everybody. All you got to do is just go click on that URL and you're good to go. You can start looking at this right away. So what I've done here is, so say we know nothing about this source of planning. Who's going to do the planning, right? So there's 4 options there. I don't really know anything about them. So I click on one, this manager facilitator thing. What the heck is that? So we bring up the description. That's the one that's in dark blue there. So each of these practices, strategies, options, have a brief description. Now, in this case, these strategies are all pretty straightforward. So there's only one sentence descriptions. Usually it's a paragraph or 2. So this might not be the greatest example, but it's fairly straightforward. So anyways, because these are straightforward options, the descriptions are brief. There's also trade-offs. There's no such thing as a best practice. Any given practice or strategy has advantages, disadvantages, works well in some situations, and is a spectacularly bad idea in others. So you need to choose, right? You choose the best approach for you in the situation that you face. So if this descriptive information still isn't enough, and frankly it's not, then, or isn't for a lot of people, and particularly if you're brand new to all this stuff, then there's detailed resources. So in this case, you would click on that and you would go to a web page with, in that case, a bunch of articles. Almost always the resources, these references are, it's a link to an article, a link to a book, or a link to a video, right? So you can go and get far more detail on the practice or the strategy if you want to. So the point is you can keep diving down into the toolkit to get the level of information you need to understand this strategy or this technique that you're trying to learn more about, in order to determine, does it make sense for us to experiment and try out that technique in practice? So how does this differ from Scrum? Well, frankly, and to be fair, these goal diagrams can be pretty intimidating at first, right? It's like, why is this so complicated? Why don't you just tell me what to do? Well, yeah, you could tell you what to do, but when you tell people what to do in a prescriptive framework, you're effectively redacting their choices. You've made decisions for them. Now, are those the right decisions? So, for example, when it comes to coordinating activities within a team or across teams, this is basically what Scrum advises. Have a daily Scrum meeting. You do some backlog refinement when it makes sense. Have face-to-face regular conversations between people. Visualize your work and workflow. Have Scrum boards, stuff like that. So that's all great advice, but what happens if you're in a different situation? What happens when your team is part of a program? Well, there's no advice for that. You've got to go to another method. You got to figure it out on your own. What happens if you've got to coordinate across the organization with different groups, or coordinate between locations? Remember a couple of years ago when COVID hit and everybody had to scramble to figure out remote work? Not if you were a DA team, because we explicitly supported remote working, for the last 10 years, because it's straightforward, because it's easy to observe that people were doing it long before COVID hit, regardless of the marketing rhetoric from some people. So anyways, this is the main difference. When you're, the methods and the frameworks, they make choices for you. They narrow down your choices. So it's easier, without a doubt, it's comfortable being told what to do sometimes, but it might not be what you want to do, or what is the right thing to do for you in your situation. So that's the main difference. So another issue around extending Scrum. So how do you begin a Scrum project, right? So sprint zero, of course, right? So you just do sprint zero. And you can go, and there's lots of people giving advice for that. But when you're kicking off a team, there's a lot of issues you need to deal with. What are you going to build? How long is it going to take? People are asking you hardcore questions, right? And if you can't answer these questions, chances are pretty good you don't get funding. So in Disciplined Agile, or in Disciplined Agile Delivery, we have a collection of process goals around focused on how do you start. So we want to do just enough work at the beginning of a project or the beginning of a team in order to get going in the right direction, right? And in Scrum, they've sort of tacked on sprint zero to get this done. This is actually a concept adopted from Jim Highsmith from the mid 1990s, but that's the idea. But they don't give you a lot of advice for how to do it. They just wave their hands and tell you to have at it. In DA, we give you options. We help you. We've done the heavy lifting on figuring this stuff out. So this is an example. This is the form team process goal diagram. So over here, I guess is what 6 or 7 or 8 process goals that you need to address, or that you should choose to address, I should say. When you're beginning an initiative, one of them is forming the team. Well, here are the issues you got to think through, right? Where are you getting these people from? How are they? How big is this team going to be? How are you going to structure the team? How geographically distributed is it? How long is this team going to last? Are you spread across time zones? How are you going to support this team, and so on, right? These are all things that you either implicitly, and I would hope explicitly, think about, right? When you're putting a team together and evolving the team over time. So we want to help you. We want to help make these decisions explicit and help make your options explicit as well. Similarly, during construction, when you're actually building or configuring whatever it is that you're doing, there's a bunch of technical questions that you should probably consider. So once again, we have process goals focused around this. Most of them actually address technical concerns. Because once again, remember, Disciplined Agile Delivery is focused on the creation or configuration of a software-based IT solution. This is the process goal diagram for addressing changing stakeholder needs. A couple interesting points here. Sometimes a little potentially more complex than what some of the methods lead you to believe. What's also interesting is notice that first decision point, stakeholder interaction with the team. So how are we going to go about getting, understanding these changing stakeholder needs? And what I find interesting about, well, first of all, there's a bunch of options. But notice how having a product owner do this is generally not the best strategy available to you. Is that something you hear in the Scrum community a lot? That there's better ways of interacting with stakeholders other than via a product owner? Huh. So this is and this is not just a Scrum issue, of course, but fundamentally, the frameworks will never tell you that there's better ways of working, potentially better ways of working, I should say, because that's not their business model. And of course, how do you release your solution in production, right? It just doesn't magically appear. You got to release it, right? You got transition or a release phase or release effort. Now, hopefully this is all fully automated and runs like that. But I'm sure many of you have been on software development projects where releasing into production was a bit of an effort. So sometimes this is called a release sprint or a hardening sprint, but just like sprint zero is not really a sprint. Sometimes it takes much longer than a sprint. Sometimes it takes less, depending on the complexity of what you're doing. Same thing with the release. If I've got a team that's very sophisticated and has been around for a long time, my release sprint might be something as simple as automatically running a deployment script. Or it might be something as complex as taking many, many weeks to release my system into the production environment. I've been involved in projects where the release sprint was 1.5 years. That's because we had to deploy hardware across the country in many different locations. Wasn't an easy task, and we couldn't shut things. We had to do it at night, one office at a time, basically, because the people there weren't sophisticated enough to do their own installs, and at the time, there wasn't organizations that we could farm this out to, at least not for a reasonable price. Now that was extreme, but I'm sure many of you have been on projects where The release or deployment phase was many days or weeks. Sometimes it happens. Of course, you want to get better at it, but it happens. So this is the goal. I'm not showing you all the goal diagrams in the toolkit, of course. They are all online, easily available. But this is the ensure production readiness process goal. Now, what's interesting here, there's two fundamental questions you got to ask. Are we technically ready to ship? So is the development team, or have we done, or have we properly tested it and all that good sort of stuff? But are our stakeholders ready to accept? So just because my team wants to deploy doesn't mean my stakeholders want it right now, right? So we better be having conversations about this. So anyways, that's the basic idea. So you got choices. It's not cut and dry. Another issue we should consider is, how do you ensure that your team succeeds? So, we've talked about how do we initiate, how do we do the construction stuff, how do we release into production, but there's ongoing effort that's also happening all the way through. So how do we go about growing our team members? How do we go about evolving our way of working? What's our approach to metrics? How do we address risk throughout the effort? How can the team be governed effectively? Because you are being governed, and I believe you deserve to be governed well. And if you don't step up, like if the methodology, if the framework that you are following, if it doesn't explicitly include governance strategies that are viable, then what's going to happen is your executives are going to figure out governance on their own. And if they're not governance experts, if they don't understand this Scrum thing that you're doing, they're probably going to come up with a governance strategy that doesn't really fit well. And that's the case in most organizations. So in DA, we explicitly include governance strategy for exactly that reason. Because you do deserve to be governed well. Chances are you won't be unless you step up. One of the process goals, one of the ongoing process goals, is intake work. So how do we bring work into the team? And it's about far more than just having a definition of ready. It's about far more than letting the product owner make the decisions, right? There's a bunch of things, and it's about far more than just doing things in value-driven order, right? So we gotta be smart about this. So there's a lot of choices you need to make, a lot of decisions you need to think through if you want to be effective at bringing work into a team. And because if you don't have an effective work intake strategy, then your flow isn't going to be any good, right? This is a fundamental lean concept, actually. This goal diagram here, and there's probably no way you can read this, is for measuring outcomes. So what could we potentially measure on an Agile team? Oh, and this, by the way, is just the team-based metrics. There's other domain-based metrics as well, of course. Point I want to make here, a few points. First, you should take an outcome or a goal-driven approach. So, follow an OKR strategy or a GQM strategy. So what do you want to improve is the fundamental question. What do you want to get better at or improve, or to, probably just improve is the strategy. Do I want to improve quality? Do I want to increase the way that we produce value? Do I want to improve the quality of the software that we're producing? Am I trying to improve my team diversity? Am I trying to increase customer delight? So my goal, the outcomes that I'm trying to achieve, will drive the metrics that I should be collecting. So be very careful about these. There's thousands now, not thousands, but easily hundreds of articles about the top 10 metrics to collect. Come on, right? It depends on your situation. It really does. You need to choose what's important to you, and then based on that, choose how to measure it. And even something as simple as quality, and I use simple rhetorically, something as simple as measuring quality will be very different on an app development team than it is on a data warehousing team, than it is on a sales team, than it is on an enterprise architecture team, right? So you can't even choose, here's the top 3 quality metrics that I want to collect, because quality means different things in different situations. So we've got to be really careful and really smart about what we measure. So anyways, just want to point out how we have a fairly sophisticated potential strategy for metrics, if you're interested in that. So this all adds up to, I believe, 26. I haven't counted. No, it's 24, I think. 24 process goals describing team agility. So once again, we don't prescribe what to do. We walk you through what to think about. We give you options, and we put those options into context so that way you can choose the right way of working for you in your situation. And yeah, that's a little more effort than than just simply adopting Scrum and then hoping for the best. But and it's a similar thing, right? So you can choose to make a healthy meal for yourself for dinner tonight, or you can choose to go to McDonald's and order the Big Mac deal. The Big Mac deal is, it's okay in some situations, and it's certainly easy, but it's probably not that healthy for you. Certainly not in the long run. I have to think you can all cook better than the Big Mac deal, right? So so keep that in mind. So let's go to a poll, and I forgot to look at the chat. I'm not seeing any numbers come from chat, so I'm assuming there's no questions. So Nicole, so how have you adopted DevOps, and how well is it working? Is the real question. So I'm gonna give you a minute or so again to answer this question.
Scott, sorry, we are talking about pool 4 or 3?
This is poll number. It says poll number 4. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you brought poll. I'm sorry. Yeah, bring up poll number 4.
Poll number 4.
Yeah,
sorry, guys, we have to change.
Okay, well, we'll bring that poll up again when it makes sense.
Okay, one more time.
Yeah. Okay. So poll number 4, how would you best describe your Scrum team? So are you a project team, a long-standing product team, a long-standing service team? Oh, and so it's a product team that's doing Scrum, and a service team doing Scrum, a project team doing Scrum, I'm sorry. So, that's why I gave you the I'm not on a Scrum team option. Okay, I'll give you about another 10 seconds for this, and then we'll wrap this one up. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Okay, so looks like it's a pretty much even split. So some of you are not on a Scrum team, fair enough. But of those of you that are, half of you are on a project team, and almost as many are on a product team, and half are either on a product or service team, so a long-standing team. So that's pretty interesting. So it's about a 50-50 split between either a project team or a long-standing team. Interesting. Good to know. Okay, so I'm gonna look at the chat. Has there been any chat questions? Okay, guess not. Fair enough. Okay, so we'll continue on. So Scrum and projects. So what does a project-based life cycle look like for Scrum is the question here. So let's jump into that. So this is the Scrum life cycle, which I hope you're all familiar with. And it's like a product or a construction-based life cycle. So all good stuff. So in DA, we extended, we started reworking the Scrum life cycle. One of the first things we did was we introduced agnostic terminology. And we did this for a couple of reasons. First, we support more than just Scrum. And it's interesting when you adopt strategies and ideas from multiple methods and frameworks and other sources like we do, you quickly see just the range of terminology and the range of thinking that's out there. So we want to be as agnostic as possible. So we purposely chose to rethink some of the terminology, and frankly, we fixed some of the problems with Scrum. For those of you who've been doing Scrum a while, or are new to it, you probably remember back to when you start telling people about Scrum meetings, or the daily Scrum or Scrum meetings, and you got to explain what it is all the time. Everybody complains about that, right? Because it's a stupid name. It's a stupid name. There's like no other way I can say it. It's stupid, right? Why not just call it, use clear language? It's a coordination meeting, right? I don't have to waste any time explaining what a coordination meeting is all about. I do have to waste time talking about what a Scrum meeting is all about. So I want to help you, and we want to help you break out of the Scrum box, right? Because a lot of people really sort of struggle with that, because so Scrum has its own unique terminology, and as a result, you tend to miss a lot of the great material outside of the Scrum community. And there's phenomenal amounts of material out there. But if you don't know the terms, if you don't know how to search for this, you'll never find it, which is a real shame. So, we've taken some of the bias out of the life cycle. But then to support projects, you need to support the bookend phases, the inception phase, or sprint zero, if you still want to call it that. You need to support the release or the deployment phase, the hardening sprints, or the deployment sprints, whatever you want to call them. So we want to address the full life cycle. So we've extended it to that. But you should be governed. Earlier I was talking about governance, right? So part of governance is to have named phases, to have, that way you can communicate where you are in the project lifecycle, to have explicit, lightweight, risk-based milestones. So you have smart, effective governance. And then of course we should put all this into context, because your team is not autonomous. This is one of the great myths in the Agile community. You work with other teams. You work with the portfolio management team, the finance team to get funding. Somebody had to initiate the team and pay for that. You're getting roadmaps, I hope, visions from the enterprise architects and the product management folks and the strategy folks and so on. What you produce eventually goes into operations and support, where it might be your team doing that work, might be another team. I don't know, right? But we should explicitly recognize that this is happening. This is actually a key concept for DevOps later on, right? It's interesting, like if you don't understand the context of your development team, then suddenly this concept of it's harder to realize that I need to collaborate effectively with these other people and hopefully get them to do some of my work and make things easier for me to or at least leverage their work. That way I don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. So let's put the life cycle in context. So the point is that when you actually, in order to pull off a successful Scrum-based project, this is the type of life cycle you end up following. And I'm sure you've seen similar things to this, maybe not this sophisticated, but there's other writings in the Scrum community doing similar things to that. And they usually don't use agnostic terminology, but be that as it may. So what about Scrum and continuous delivery? Because I would argue that the Scrum product lifecycle really is about continuous delivery. That's what they imply. Now, so we'll go back to the Scrum lifecycle. So first point I want to make is you had to initiate that team at some point, right? So like consider the Microsoft Word team. That team's been going for 30 some odd years. And they've been a team for 30 years. Yes, people have come and gone and all that sort of stuff, but somebody had to start that team, on day one, right? And do all the work to get it going. Now it's just chugging along, and it'll probably be chugging along 30 years from now, and that's fine. Transition still occurs. Microsoft Word team still deploys. I think once a week, or whatever the deployment thing is. And that's all automated and all that sort of stuff, but they still deploy, right? So we should explicitly recognize that. And there's still no context here. So when you start to address these sorts of problems, you end up with a life cycle looks like this, very similar to Scrum, but we've brought the appropriate milestones into play. We've still put it in context. What's also interesting, if I go back a few slides, my apologies. So the project lifecycle has, indicates all of the milestones because we're going from beginning to end in a specific period of time, whereas the continuous delivery lifecycle only has 3 milestones. Now, at some point, that team must have fulfilled the inception and the early architecture milestones, but they're long past that now, right? So the Microsoft Word team, they don't have to prove the architecture anymore. It works. It's up and running. It's been up and running for decades. right? Now, every so often they do a major rewrite. You might have to prove the architecture at that point. But that's, be that as it may. So anyways, and this is exactly what I said earlier. Address the appropriate milestones in the appropriate way. Different teams in different situations will do different things, and that's okay. Scrum and DevOps. So how can Scrum be part of the DevOps process, particularly when it doesn't explicitly address operations? So anyways, poll number 3. I see the confusion. I've got the questions numbered in the wrong way. So Jan, if you could bring up that DevOps question again. My apologies to everybody. So this is obviously my fault.
Okay, here we go. The third question.
Yeah. Hopefully people give the same answers as before. But anyways, we'll give this about 30 seconds. So what's your how have you adopted DevOps, if at all? Oh, I see there's something in the chat. I'll once we finish this poll, I'll go take a look and see what happened here.
So Mateusz Żukociński said just that he appreciates really your idea about agnostic terminology.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't really a question. Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, let's end this poll and let's take a look at it. Okay, what's interesting here? So roughly a third of you are not considering or are not working for an organization considering it this time. A quarter are doing it and struggling, but a quarter are doing it but still have more work to do, and a little over 10% think they're done. Fantastic. Okay, so it's interesting. So roughly a third or roughly a quarter are struggling a bit, which is fine. It happens. It's hard. 10 years ago, these numbers would have been a lot different, I think. But luckily, there's a lot of good DevOps expertise. So why did I ask? Well, what I want to do is I'm going to take a look at DevOps from an enterprise class point of view, rather than the classic DevOps stuff. So actually, I'll go back 2 slides. So DevOps traditionally has been shown as something like this, right? This classic infinite loop. The development teams that working closely with the operations team, feedback's occurring, all that good sort of stuff. And this is certainly a very, very good thing, and a great starting point. But it's only a starting point. So a couple of questions I want to start walking through. So first, is your development strategy to support DevOps? Right, because there's a lot to it, and it's certainly CI/CD, and we're all doing that sort of stuff. So in Disciplined Agile Delivery, one of the process goals is accelerate value delivery, and this is basically optimizing your flow and automating the living heck out of things, and doing a lot of good testing stuff, like good quality stuff. So the point I want to make is that there's a lot of DevOps friendly options built right into DAD. What's interesting, so Disciplined Agile Delivery was first described in a book with the title Disciplined Agile Delivery. Wow, magic, from IBM Press in 2012. And at that time, we had baked DevOps stuff in right at the very beginning into Disciplined Agile Delivery, because it was, the writing was on the wall even back then, that DevOps was here to stay and absolutely critical to your success. So just wanted to point that out. But DevOps is great, but what about the business? Can the business side of your house, can they accept these changes in production many times a day? Does the business understand technology, and so on? So these are hard questions. So it's not just about DevOps, but we really need biz DevOps, right? So if the techies are doing a really good job, doing a high quality job and releasing things and evolve things really quickly, but the business isn't able to step up and be actively involved and understand the implications of what's happening, you've got a problem, right? So you need to be working hand in glove. What about security, right? So, it's great that you can deploy stuff into production many times a day, but if it's not secure, you got a very serious issue there. So we really need DevSecOps. So the combination of DevOps plus security. Well, what about data? The systems, the applications that we build are a combination of functionality and data, right? So if your programmers are able to change their code like that and deploy into production, but your data people take weeks or months to make a change to the data structures in a production data source, then you're not really doing DevOps, are you? You're not. So you need data DevOps, not just DevOps. And finally, what about enterprise class operations and support? So it's really easy to say that my team is doing DevOps, that we're going to operate our own stuff. You build it, you support it, you build it, you run it. Which is great. I'm a firm believer in stuff like that. But what happens when we have hundreds of systems? Well, if we have hundreds of systems, there's going to be some shared infrastructure. My team is not responsible for the shared infrastructure, nor should we be. Nor should we be updating it unless it's under a controlled situation, right? If there's hundreds of systems, think of a bank. If there's hundreds of systems, as an end user, how do I get help using this one system that I run into a problem with, right? So we need more than just my development team supports the app. We might be part of the support effort, but we're not the entire support effort. Because as an end user, I don't want to potentially have to talk and interact with 100 different development teams in order to get help in whatever I'm struggling with at the present moment, right? I want to be able to go to one place, get help, and then get routed accordingly. So we need enterprise class operations and support. So enterprise DevOps, not just team DevOps. So the interesting implication, as I think you've seen, is on every one of these last 4 or 5 slides, I've introduced a new workflow diagram. So when you add all those diagrams up, you get something that looks like this, right? So it's not this, fancy and slick marketing infinite loop thing. I wish it was, but it's not, right? It's more complicated, and it's always more complicated than what the marketing people want to tell you. So anyways, the point is that to do enterprise class DevOps, it's complicated because this is a big issue. This is a complicated issue. This is why many of you are struggling, or many of you are still working on figuring this stuff out because of the complexity that you face. So you can either tough it out and figure it out on your own, or you can leverage something like the DA toolkit to help you out with this. And in behind all this are options, of course, right? There's different ways we can approach release management and data management and security and support. And you inherently know this, right? For those of you, if any of you have done any of those job functions, you know that there's many different ways of doing it, and that you need to, tailor your strategy to the way that you work. This is just the reality on the ground. So poll number 5, hopefully I've got the number right. How effective is your team at improving their way of working? Can you give you about 20 more seconds on this one? Okay, 5 more seconds, and then we'll end it. Okay, let's end it. Okay, So let's take a look at the results. So one of you said you're not trying to improve at all. How sad. 30% are trying, but it's not working well. 2/3 of you are saying you're doing okay at it. Nobody says you're really good at it. Also, how sad. But anyways, luckily nobody said that you're not allowed to improve. So that's a good thing. Anyways, okay. So why did I ask this question? Well, because I'm gonna walk you through how you can get really, hopefully, very good at process improvement. So how can we improve existing Scrum teams, right? So many of you are doing Scrum or Safe or whatever else, right? So how can you improve your team? So start where you are type of mentality. So I'm a firm believer, once again, of observing, right? What are the successful organizations doing? So like the Amazons and the Googles of the world, like the organizations that you'd be really scared to have to compete against. How did they get as good as they are? Well, they follow a technique called Kaizen, continuous improvement. And there's different names for it, PDSA and PDCA, but this is basically the way it works. So they identify an issue or a problem. They want to get better at something, whatever that something happens to be. So they identify one or more ways that they could potentially improve. Then they try out the strategies, they experiment, and they measure, and they assess. They give it a fair shake, and they assess how effective it was. If something works, they adopt it. If something doesn't work, they abandon it. They've learned something and they move on. And if they're polite, they share their learnings with others. And as I said, this is often called, plan, do, study, act, or plan, do, check, act, depending on which version you look at. There's different, slightly different nuances to this, but this is basically the way it works out. So this is a pretty good story. And what happens is the organizations like the Amazons, the Googles, the Alibabas of the world, the ones that are doing this, enjoy an improvement curve that looks like this. They're effective over time, their effectiveness goes up. Now, this is really a jagged curve, right? Because you have some failed experiments, it goes down a bit, but over time, it just continues to improve. So they don't get this peak that we saw earlier with the frameworks. Ivar Jakobsen wrote a really good article for IEEE Software a couple of years ago on this topic. He called it, do you know how to escape method prison or method jail? And what his point was is that when you adopt these methods, you eventually end up in jail because you get to the point where you've achieved the benefits of the method, and they don't really tell you how to move on and move past that methodology that you've just invested all that time to adopt. So the successful organizations, they're doing this sort of a thing. So that's a great story. But what actually happens? So you try something out and you fail. Hopefully you fail fast, right? So earlier I promised I was going to examine the fail fast mantra that we keep hearing from all the consultants. So, you fail fast, and which is way better than failing slowly. I'm a firm believer in that, without a doubt. So you try again and you fail fast again. You try again and you fail fast again. You try again. And eventually you succeed. You got it right. So you adopt it, and you tend to share your successes, not your failures, and you move on, right? So this is typically what happens. And, you might fail once or twice and then succeed. Maybe you succeed in the first time. Maybe you fail 5 times, maybe you fail 100 times, and you eventually succeed, right? So, big, different number of failures, but this is basically the way things play out. So if you're the person paying for all those failures, let's go back to that slide. Say you're the person paying for those failures. Would you be happy? Like, really, you paid your pack. You've got some very highly expensive people, and they're failing all the time. They're doing all, they're trying to improve, good for them, but they're failing at it a lot, right? And this is something that came out of the survey that I did, the poll we did a few minutes ago, right? Not working as well as you'd hoped. So the problem with this is, so how can we, so a fair question is, how can we improve on continuous improvement? Like, should we not apply continuous improvement to continuous improvement? Is a fair question to ask, which we did. So anyways, Where's the problem here? Well, some experiments fail. And yes, you learn something, right? So there's all this rhetoric from the consultants, right? You want to fail fast rather than failing slowly. And okay, fair enough. Failing fast is certainly better than failing slowly. And it's not really a failure because you're learning something. What a crock. Come on. Like, yeah, it's better than not learning something, I guess, but not much, right? It's still a failure. It's not really moving us closer to the goal. Can we be smarter about this? So yeah, failing fast is fine, but you know what? I'd rather succeed earlier. Let's get smarter about this. Really, let's get smarter about this. So the real problem is in that second step. If I can get better at identifying potential techniques, then we can have fewer failures, right? Make a better decision, you'll have fewer failures. Now, you're still going to fail, right? You're only human, you're still going to make mistakes every so often, but you can reduce the chance of a failure. You can reduce the number of mistakes that you make. So how do you do that? Well, if you have an experienced Agile coach who's been there, done that, seen these sorts of problems before, they can provide guidance for you, right? And that's a great thing, don't get me wrong. But do you have good coaches? Can you find them? Can you attract them and retain them? Do they have experience in the problems that you're facing right now? Do they have experience in the problems that you're going to face? An alternative, or actually an extension to that, is if you've got access to a process knowledge base, such as the DA toolkit, and you know how to use it, then you can make better decisions. And particularly a good Agile coach that knows how to use the toolkit is probably a pretty good thing, right? It is a pretty good thing, not probably, it is a good thing. So we want to get better at identifying potential techniques. So what happens when we do that? So this is a technique that we call guided continuous improvement. It's an improvement on continuous improvement. So we saw that when you adopt a framework, you enjoy an improvement curve that looks like this. And this is good. This is a good thing. It gets you going. That's a good thing, but it's not your ending point. That's the critical observation. Adopting a framework is only a good start. It's not your ending point. The firms like the Amazons of the world, they enjoy an improvement curve that looks like this. They're just constantly improving. That's why Amazon is as scary as they are and as effective as they are, is they got on this bandwagon, on this strategy a couple decades ago now. They've been improving since pretty much the beginning of their of them starting, and they've continued to improve over time. That's why they're so far ahead of you. With guided continuous improvement, you enjoy a learning curve like this because you have fewer failures. So you improve, you have more successes, so you're improving faster and it's cheaper. So with just a little bit of skill and access to a free toolkit, then you can improve faster. So once again, our philosophy, start where you are. If you're doing Scrum today, great. Apply DA to improve Scrum. If you're doing SAFe, great. Apply DA to improve SAFe. If you're still doing Serial, great. Apply DA to improve Serial. So it's an extension to your existing way of working. You're not throwing away your investment in whatever it is that you've already adopted. So start where you are, do the best that you can in the situation that you face, and everybody is facing a unique situation, hence the need for choice, and always strive to get better. Be constantly improving, be constantly experimenting, constantly improving. Our last poll, and I'm going to show you a few examples of doing this, and then we'll call it a night. So poll number 6, what's the current focus of your Agile improvement efforts? So where are you trying to improve? So Jan, if you could bring that up, please. Or maybe I can. Hang on here. Oh, there we go. Okay. So anyways, I'll give you about a minute for this. So you just focused on software teams, several types of teams. You're not doing improvement at all. Okay, I'll give you about another 20 seconds. We tend to peak out at about 20 people answering this. Fair enough. I don't like polls either. I feel your pain. But still, it'd be nice if you answer it. 10 more seconds. Okay, let's end it there. Okay, one person got in right at the last moment. So let's take a look what happened here. So 15% are not adopting Agile, but 20% are focusing just on software teams. Quarter view or several types of team, a little bit around cross-team collaboration, and about a fifth of you are improving value streams, and 10% the entire organization. Excellent. So you're all over the place. That's all good news. So let's take a look at why I asked that question. So a valid question is where do you need to improve, or where are you improving, or where do you need to improve? Because maybe, for those of you who are just starting out, maybe you're just focusing on software teams, for example. So there's always improvement. There's always the opportunity to improve at the team level, regardless of the type of team, right? If it's a software team or the sales team or the marketing team, you can always improve. You can always get better. There's no such thing as a perfect team. You can also improve across teams. So my team has to interact with other teams. So we have to interact with the finance team, for example, to get funding. I have to interact with the procurement team in order to buy stuff. I have to interact with the strategy team to get direction on where we should be going and to provide feedback on where we're going. And we can improve across the organization, across value streams, across the entire organization as well, and help many teams work together more effectively. So this is all good stuff. Unfortunately, we run into challenges. Many organizations have found that there's a glass barrier to Agile adoption. It's not, Agile is not getting out of the software area, right? It's not getting out of the IT ghetto. And this is a problem. And a lot of it is because of the coaches. They're very good coaches for software teams, not so good for the finance team, right? A couple of years ago now, I was working with this lady. She was a CFO at an organization, and we were chatting away. And so I asked her, how's your Agile adoption going on? And she says, it's a bit of a mess. And I said, well, why? And said, well, the software folks, they're doing good, but my team, the finance group and others, I got the other business areas, we're not seeing much benefit from Agile. Oh, really? Why? Why is that? And she said, well, we talk to these Agile coaches and they talk a good game, but it's like listening to my 6-year-old, right? So they share these great, what they believe to be great ideas, and they tell us, they can solve our problems, and here's how you solve the problems. But just like my 6-year-old does. But I basically, just like with my 6-year-old, I think that, I say, oh, that's a great idea, honey. I basically pat them on the head and I send them on their way, right? Because, what the 6-year-old or what the Agile coach thinks is a great idea for finance is actually phenomenally naive and won't work. So we basically ignore them, but it's cute to talk to them. Well, that's a bit of a problem. So I'll show you how to solve that problem. And fair enough, right? This is the customer of your coaching, and they're comparing you to 6-year-olds. So there's a bit of a problem there in my mind. And then, of course, at the organizational level, there's organizational antibodies. The culture doesn't want to change. You might want to help improve, but other people don't want to be improved. They're happy doing what they're doing, or they have a very different view of what needs to happen. And this is why, one of many reasons why Agile transformations tend to fail. These organizational transformations have a 70 to 80% failure rate. That's a bit of a problem. And so we need to get better at doing this stuff. And I'll share some strategies on how to do it. I think you've seen some of them already, but I'll definitely hammer on them. So in order to improve at the team level, you probably want to hire some good team coaches. To improve across teams, you need senior coaches who are very experienced. Even the team coaches need to be experienced. And this is a challenge. There's a serious issue in the Agile community with the quality of our coaches. Anybody can hang out, can say that they're a coach. I've literally seen people take a CSM class and then a couple months later telling, advertising that they're now an experienced agile coach, and they've had 2 days of training and maybe a couple months of Scrum experience, and they're pitching themselves as a coach. Holy crow. I can't even imagine that. So anyways, we got an issue there. It's not just a Scrum thing. This is just a general thing. So our senior coaches need to have a fair bit of experience, and they need to know how to coach across disparate teams. It's not just about coaching my software team. It's also about coaching, the marketing folks and the sales folks. So, because if my team has to interact in a better manner with the procurement folks, we need somebody to negotiate that thing we're going to experiment with, that new technique that we're going to experiment with, and see if it works for the two teams. It's not just about my team now. It's about all the teams that I have to collaborate with, right? So I need to negotiate the experiments with them. Whole new ballgame. And at the organization level, we need very experienced enterprise coaches. There's not a lot out there. A lot of people claiming they're enterprise coaches, but there's not a lot of them actually qualified to do that job. So we've got a very serious problem with that. Okay, so let's run through a few scenarios, and then we'll wrap it up. So how do we improve at the team level? So in this situation, I'm on a team right now, and we produce teddy bears. So we bring teddy bears to market, and our existing customer base loves us. We're selling to little kids. Who doesn't like teddy bears? It's all good. And our product owner understands our existing customers really well and represents their needs to us. But we got a problem. Our customer base isn't growing. We're not attracting new customers. So our existing customers love, the new teddy bears we bring to market, but we're not growing the market. We're not getting new people buying the bears. So we got a problem here. And we need to grow our customer base. Our bonuses are on the line for this one. So what do? Well, we realize we've got a problem with the way that we're exploring scope. So our product owner is really good, has a really good handle on our existing customer base, doesn't really understand potential customers at all. And we've been, she's been writing up user stories and all good sort of stuff, and just isn't getting it. It's not working. So, and we're not requirements experts. So we have, we're know a little bit about requirements, but we don't have like a solid business analyst on the team. So we got an issue. So we go to the toolkit. We look at the explore scope diagram. We do a little bit of reading, and we realize, more than likely the problem we've got is the way we explore usage. We don't really understand how potential customers are going to use the new teddy bears. What features do they want that we're not currently offering them, right? We're, for the potential customers. And so even though we're writing up user stories and epics, it's not getting the job done. We've got a problem. Now, if I had an experienced requirements person on the team, more than likely they'd be able to suggest the answer. If I had a coach with good requirements background, they'd be able to suggest what to experiment with. Sadly, we don't have that. So we dive down, we bring up the browser, dive down into some details, we start doing some reading, right? And we realize, oh, wait a minute, sounds like this persona thing is the way to go. And and there's if we don't, and if this is not enough of a description, and frankly, it's not. If I'd never done personas before, then I would have to click on the references for personas and go read a couple articles or whatever. And in this case, I think we link to a book or two and some articles. So anyways, we could do more reading and learn all there is to know about personas. But it sounds like this is the technique we should experiment with, because personas are useful at exploring non-custom, like the types of stakeholders that we can't get access to. In this case, people who aren't our existing customers already. So this sounds like sounds like it's going to work. Sounds like we can pull it off. So this is probably what we should experiment with, rather than randomly experimenting with some other technique. We can home in on something that's more than likely going to work for us. So let's up the game. How do we improve across teams? So in this situation, finance comes to us and says, so my team is chugging away, we're building our teddy bears. And the finance team comes along and says, well, your funding's about to run out. We need you to create a business case, a project plan, have it reviewed by the PMO, and hopefully we're going to extend your funding for another 6 months, right? Jump through all these hoops, do all this bureaucracy. So we respond with, well, wait a minute. This sounds like useless bureaucracy to us. We're going to spend a couple of weeks doing this planning stuff. This doesn't provide any value. This is not value added. Why do you insist on this? Well, this is the way we do things here, right? And we realize that this is not the agile way of doing things, but we've experimented in the past with time and materials, which is what you wanted to do. You told us that was the agile way of doing things, and it didn't work out. So we got a problem here, right? So obviously the old-fashioned upfront way is the way to do it, because the agile way didn't work for us. Got a problem here. This is a common problem in a lot of organizations. I'm not gonna pull you on this one, but anyways, it's a common problem. Trust me. So what do? Well, we go to the toolkit again. Oh, and once again, we don't have any finance experts on our team, because that's just the way it is, including our coach, right? But we go to the team. We go to the toolkit, and we look at secure funding, and we realize, well, first of all, the strategies that we're currently doing, even though they work, they're not that effective in practice, which is why we're pushing back, right? We know that this fixed price stuff is not working out so well, right? It's a problem. And we're being treated as a project team, and it's, and the internal process is fairly onerous. It's fairly formal to get more money for the next project. So we got a problem here. So we go to the toolkit. First thing we do is we do a little bit of reading about the existing technique, because it's pretty clear that if we don't know what we're talking about, the finance people don't want to hear anything from us anymore, right? We got to know what we're talking about. So we do a little bit of reading. We find out, oh yeah, look, there are some problems with what we're doing. And more than likely too, what typically happens is in situations where your existing organization, is following an existing strategy that's not really all that great, more than likely they're focusing on the benefits and ignoring the disadvantages. So yeah, because there are some advantages. Well, one, in this case, but there's some disadvantages too, right? So we're suffering from the disadvantages. Finance people, they're probably focused on the advantages, right? So we do a little bit of reading. We also realize, wait a minute, there's 4 different strategies, not just time and materials. There's 4 different strategies that we could potentially adopt, maybe more, right? So in no way, shape, or form are we saying that these are all the strategies known to mankind, but we are saying that there's a pretty good range, enough to get enough options to let you think, to get you thinking about it, right? Let you know you've got choices. Okay, so the standard time materials approach from Agile, for whatever reason, didn't work for us, right? So they don't want to hear that story again. If we experiment with time materials again, we're probably going to fail yet again. That's not good. So anyways, we do a little bit of reading, and we realize, well, wait a minute, maybe we should take a stage gate approach. Better than what we're currently doing. Not quite as good as time materials or the other 2 techniques that I'm not showing here, but it's better than what we were doing. So maybe we should give it a shot. Okay, so now the idea is we can speak intelligently to our options. We can present, hey, you know what? Why don't we try stage gate? Here's why we want to try it. We're suffering from these other problems. Stage gate will solve some of them, so we should see better. It should work out better. Why don't we try it just on our team, not across all teams, just on our team? Let's see if it works for us. Okay. Certainly, just one more, and then I see some questions coming up, so I'm going to I'll take the questions in a minute. So another scenario, in this case, improving cross-organization. So this life cycle is the value stream life cycle, the DA Flex value stream life cycle. So in this situation, oops, wrong direction. The portfolio management team, our governance team, says, hey, we need to release new offerings to market faster. We want to, become more competitive. That's a great idea. Product management says, yeah, we would love to release smaller, have smaller releases in the market, release minimum business increments rather than having big releases. That's, release small chunks of value on a regular basis rather than, these annual releases that we're currently doing today. Portfolio management team comes back, well, wait, no, that's no good. We fund projects, not new features. Release management comes to us and says, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. We'd love to support a quicker release cadence with smaller, safer releases. But sadly, the data people Any change takes 3 months for them to do. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing big projects and not small releases, is because of the data stuff. The data folks, they come to us and say, yep, well, data's different. Rules don't apply to us. We need to think everything through up front. Agile just doesn't apply. We're special. Totally false, by the way, but that's what they believe. Go to the agiledata.org if you want to learn more about that. And finally, the portfolio management people come back to us and circle around and say, well, we need to release new offerings to market faster, right? So we're having this absolutely dysfunctional conversation across these disparate teams, all of which have good stories to tell, all of which are working very well on their own. But together, we need to negotiate a better strategy of working across these 4 teams, and frankly, probably across more teams. These are just the ones that are talking right now, in order to improve. So we would need to go to the toolkit, start looking around for what, a combination of, whatever we're currently doing today, but then a combination of potentially better things that we can do and experiment with across these teams, within and then across these teams accordingly. So before I wrap up here, actually, you know what? I'm just going to wrap up because there's like two or three more slides, and then I'll open up wide to questions. So how can we learn more? So PMI is a not-for-profit organization, as we heard earlier. Our goal is to help you to learn how to work smarter, not harder, to become change makers and help drive the change that you want to see within your organization. So if you want to learn more, excuse me, about Disciplined Agile, first, the URL at the top is the Disciplined Agile, what we call the Disciplined Agile Hub. This is where the Disciplined Agile Toolkit is freely available to you, including the browser. All right, so there's more to it than just what I was showing with the browser. But anyways, we also support organizations that do training, and we offer certifications if you're interested in that. So our novice certification is called the Disciplined Agile Scrum Master, and this is arguably misnamed because it's about far more than just Scrum. It's about Agile and Lean and looking at the full process, not just what Scrum wants to focus on. So it goes far beyond Scrum. A lot of the ideas that we talked about here today in this webinar. Following up from that is the Senior Scrum Master. You need a couple of years of experience in order to test for this. And it's really all about how do you lead, and once again, probably misnamed, but how do you lead improvement at the team level? So how do you, what are the basic skills of being a team coach and leading improvement and doing this guided continuous improvement thing within a team? The Disciplined Agile Coach cert requires several years experience again, and focuses on leading improvement across disparate teams. So that scenario where there's my team, the finance team, or my team and procurement, or my team, procurement, and HR all get involved, right? So just across 2 or 3 teams that are different, yet they need to work together and choose to experiment with new ways of working to improve and to work together more effectively across the teams. And then finally, the Disciplined Agile Value Stream Consultant. So how do we lead improvement across value streams, across the organization? This is enterprise coaching level skills. It requires significant experience and knowledge to pull off. So anyways, so thank you very much. I appreciate this has probably been a long evening for most of you.